The African American Legends series highlights the accomplishments of blacks in areas as varied as politics, sports, aviation, business, literature, and religion. We will explore how African Americans have succeeded in areas where they've been previously excluded because of segregation, racism, and lack of opportunity. I'm your host, Dr. Roscoe C. Brown, Jr., and today we will talk with Professor Brenda Green, who is the director of the Center for Black Literature at Medgar Evers College of the City University of New York. Hi, Brenda. Glad to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Brown.
You've done such a great job with the Center for Black Literature. Tell us, how did it start and what have you been doing over these many, I think it started in 1986 or 80.
Well, the National Black Writers Conference started in 1986.
Let's start with what was the purpose of the National Black Writers Conference?
The National Black Writers Conference was a vision of the late John Oliver Killens. And John Oliver Killens believed that there should be a conference that brought together writers, black writers from across the country and internationally together to talk about the issues and the trends and the future of black literature. When he became professor or resident writer at Medgar Evers College.
To the audience that before John Oliver Killens went to Medgar Evers, he was our distinguished professor in residence at Bronx Community College, and he had some small conferences dealing with black writers, and he was very instrumental in helping some of our students to get skills who are now actually published writers. And then he went to Medgar Evers, and that's when he made his dream come true.
Yes, he continued that tradition. And of course, before Bronx, I think he had some conferences at Fisk University, at the New School. But at Medgar Evers College, he continued the tradition of really mentoring young writers, emerging writers, holding workshops at the college, in his home. And part of the vision was to host the National Black Writers Conference. So the first conference was hosted at Medgar Evers College in 1986. And John Oliver Killens was, of course, able to call on all of the writers he had known over the years. Maya Angelou was the keynote speaker, the featured speaker, but many writers came to that conference. And then subsequent conferences, the next conference was in 1988. And unfortunately, John Oliver Killens had passed then. But conferences continued in 88, then 91, 96, and 2000. And then the Center for Black Literature was founded, and I wrote a proposal under the leadership of me, Brenda Green. I had served as coordinator of the National Black Writers Conferences until then. And in 2003, or actually 2002, I wrote a proposal to CUNY for a letter of intent and a proposal to establish the Center for Black Literature. And one of the goals of the Center for Black Literature was to become the umbrella organization under which the National Black Writers Conference could continue. So the Center for Black Literature, in addition to being a vehicle for nurturing and cultivating the reading habits of black writers and disseminating information about the general public, about black writers to the general public, the center also held workshops. We have programs with high school students, literary programs.
To teach them how to write or help them to appreciate writing?
Well, it really goes back to how do we make the general public and young people and students aware of the contributions of black writers and the fact that black writers come from many backgrounds, and that you cannot just place black writing under one genre or one kind of trend. That black writing, the writing produced by black writers is complicated. It crosses many genres, it crosses many, it brings together different
But isn't that true of all writing? Couldn't we have a center for Polish writing, a center for Irish writing, a center for Chinese writing? Isn't it true that writing is a generic activity where one expresses in their own language their experiences, their observations? Isn't that really true?
Yeah, that's very true. Writing is based on the human experience. But we all have come from a particular cultural background. We all have varied experiences that are related to the way we were brought up, that relate to our environment, that relate to how we perceive things. And people write from particular niches. I always think about the fact that all writing is autobiographical. So if all writing is autobiographical and you go back into your experience, you're going to write about the human experience, but you're going to write it from your perspective. And I think that when you look at what's happening in the literature of produced by Black writers, as I said, it's become much more complicated because we have such a wide range of people who are writing. You have people who are writing from the Caribbean perspective. You have African people writing from the African perspective. You have the younger generation who are part of this hip hop culture who are writing across racial boundaries.
Like your son?
Yes, like my son, yeah. So I think that the writing is reflecting what's happening in our culture, and you have people writing from a broad range of issues. You have more people telling their own stories. I mean, think for example, we had several years ago at one of our conferences, Valerie Boyd, who told the story of Zora Neale Hurston. Now, she wrote the second biography of Zora Neale Hurston. The first biography of Zora was written by a white male. And he met her and he told her it's time that that story was told from the perspective of a Black woman. There are different experiences and different nuances and different issues that might be highlighted when you tell your own stories. You give your own perspective. You give the information that was left out. And that's what happens. That's why it's important to have writers who are bringing in those stories and those facts that have traditionally been left out.
If you had a Black writer who wrote about a white experience and didn't relate it to Blacks at all, would you include that as Black literature?
Yes, because the literature produced by Black writers is multifaceted. It's complex. It reflects
but if he's
all
writing
of
about the white experience like a white writer.
What do you mean?
Why would you have him or her in your...
Because what we're saying is that you cannot define the literature produced by Black writers in one way.
Okay, that's the point. We see you have 2 points. You have a political point where Blacks have been oppressed and they express their oppression in various ways in writing. But you have another point is the job opportunities, the occupation of Black writers should not just be limited to writing about Black folks.
Well, I think I go back to it's writing about their human experience.
But
and it's
maybe
writing,
they're not. Maybe they're like journalists. See,
it's writing
Black
about
journalists
politics.
have been criticized because they write just like white journalists in terms of the style.
What does that mean?
That means that they do not reflect in their writing their experiences as a Black person.
Well, I think every writer, and I think writers in general, have a responsibility to be culturally responsive.
But suppose they're not.
And if they're not, then you can raise issues and ask why they aren't. And you can look at what perspective they've left out, and that's why you have critical scholarship on writers. You know, I think about the analogy, what happens when you go into a bookstore. There was a debate as to whether there should be a separate section for Black writers or should it be integrated into all literature because it's part of the literary experience, it's part of the American.
What do you think?
I think we need both.
Okay.
I think we need both because these stories and experiences have been left out too long. And so that if you just integrate the literature produced by Black writers into all literary texts, their voices will be missed, they will be marginalized, they will not be heard.
Let me ask this. Maya Angelou is known the world over. You could put her book in the white book section and people would buy it just as they buy it now. If it was limited just to the Black section, would it be seen as much or read as much?
Exactly, that's why I said you need both. It should be in both sections. One of the writers, in fact, she may still be teaching at CUNY, at City College, Emily Rapoport. She wrote a book about the professor's daughter and talked about how difficult it was to get that book published. She looks as if she could be Caucasian, but she's white. So she went into the bookstore and asked about the book, and they said, well, it's in it's in the African American section. I think that's what, and I hope I'm getting the story right. They said it was in the African American section, and she wanted to know why it wasn't in the other section. And they were confused by the fact that she looked Caucasian, but she was actually the author of a book that was in the African American section. So the point being that it was important that that book should be displayed in both sections. And I think if we did not live in a society that was constructed by race, and that's a fact, because that's what people see first. If we did not live in a society that was constructed by race, then we could say you don't need to have a section which focuses on just black writers. We could say there's no need, for example, for a Center for Black Literature. There is a need for a Center for Black Literature because if you look at what's happening in the schools, you look at what's happening in the colleges, you look at the general public, if we did not have a place, a resource where the literature that's being produced by black writers could be explored and discussed, there are too many people who would not know about it.
Let me ask this. Is most black literature read mainly by blacks?
I think there are two kinds of literature. There's the literature that's predominantly read by black readers, but there's also a literature that crosses boundaries. And you use the example. You used the example Obama, our president.
What?
Our president, Obama.
No, I mean.
Okay, Walter Mosley. Walter Mosley has a wide readership. We had Walter Mosley at a signing, and we had a really integrated audience. One of the writers we're featuring for the next National Black Writers Conference, Ngugi wa Thiong'o. He's a Kenyan writer. He has a wide readership. John Edgar Wideman has a wide readership. Ishmael Reed, who we're also featuring, has a wide readership. You will find a more integrated audience. We did a symposium on Octavia Butler, the speculative fiction writer, a wide readership. So I think that you do have people who are looking at good writing. If you're a good writer and serious, you're writing serious literary fiction, or let me say literary fiction, you will have more of a cross range. And that's part of what we're trying to do also when we host the conference, is to try and expand the audience and the readership, to say that this is focusing on the literature produced by black writers, but we believe, again, part of our mission, the general public needs to be made aware of that.
Do you do any criticism of the writing? There have been several books written by black writers about the black experience that have gotten a lot of what you might call negative criticism from other blacks. Do you include that in your discussion?
We include issues, controversial issues, such as, for example, the literature of the urban literature. We include that as part of our discussion at our panels. We try to, when we do the conference, rather than focusing on individual writers, we try to focus on issues that are present in the literary experience.
Would
For
that
example,
be political?
we look at politics, the impact of politics on literature. We look at the environment. You know, people are writing more about environmental literature. We look at the impact of the internet on literature. We look at the range of stories from different historical perspectives that people are writing about. We look at the fact that, for example, we had a panel called East-West Relationships. And on that panel, we looked at the fact that a person, one of the professors here, Mina Alexander, who was born in India, lived in Egypt, and then ended up, eventually coming to the States and growing up in the States. And she's writing from a broad range of experiences. And when you think about what constitutes the literature produced by black writers, I think that's a perfect example, that it crosses continents. It could be Asia, it could be Africa, it could be Europe, it could be the United States. It's broad. And I don't think that people tend to think about the literature in that way.
To what extent do you cover some of the iconic black writers like Ralph Ellison, Zora Neale Hurston, and Charles Chesnutt? Do you ever deal with them, or are you dealing only with contemporary black writers?
Well, I think we deal with them in a sense if you have people, as I mentioned before, who are writing books representing the literature produced by the classical and traditional black writers. We're dealing with it in that way. We also have a call for papers as part of the discussion that we do at the conference. So, for example, our upcoming conference, we're honoring Nikki Giovanni and Ngugi wa Thiong and Ishmael Reed. And we always pay tribute to our founder, John Oliver Kellogg. So we ask for people to do papers on that. You may have some people who look at the way in which classical African American texts may compare to the texts produced by black writers. And that way the scholarship and the criticism comes in. So, but in terms of do we study the particular work, I think that happens more in courses. And people who are teaching African American literature may encourage their students to come and look at the fact that you have a legacy that can be traced back. When you look at contemporary black writers, you have a legacy that can be traced back to the writers of the Harlem Renaissance, to the early African American literature. And there are even Africanisms what we call Africanisms that are present in the literature that's currently produced.
When is your next Black Writers Conference going to be?
Our next Black Writers Conference is coming up in March 2012, March 29th through April 1st.
At Medgar
Evers College. And we always have pre-conference activities leading up to the conference. So we'll do something probably at the Schomburg Center and something at the Brooklyn Public Library. We're working out the details. But the majority of the programming will be at the conference, at Medgar Evers College. And we start with the young people. We invite schools, elementary schools and high schools to bring students, and we have them have an opportunity to interact with black writers. We do workshops. We do really interactive programming around the literature produced by black writers. So we have a combination of a large program and then smaller workshops that people can participate in. We try to provide books by some of the writers who will be at the conference. We also, this year we're adding a film series. And so we're having a film series on the literature related to black writers on the Friday of the conference. Thursday is devoted to the young people. On Thursday evening, we will also have a poetry reading, a poetry cafe, where we're going to look at some highlighted poets, and then also have people come up and do sort of like a poetry slam. And we invite young people to read poetry.
Read their own poetry.
Read their own poetry.
Now, how can someone in the audience find out about this conference? Is there a website where
you can go to the Center for Black Literature website, www.centerforblackLiterature.org, and you can click on National Black Writers Conference. But if I may, I'd just like to share some of the highlights of the conference. I just have the program. The program is on the conference website, and as I said, we are honoring Ishmael Reed and Ngugi wa Thiong, Howard Dotson, and Nikki Giovanni we're honoring at the conference. And that starts on March 29th. We have the spoken word workshop, we have youth programs, and then we have the papers that are looking at the works of those writers who we're honoring. And then on Friday, we will be screening for certain films by black writers. And we also have an elders, one of the programs of the Center for Black Literature is an elders writers workshop. And this is a workshop where it's a collaboration with Siloam Presbyterian Church, which was the site of the Underground Railroad. And we have a writer who goes to the church bi-weekly. That's funded by Poets and Writers. and they meet with African American elders, and they're telling their story. So we usually have a workshop where they read and present their work. That'll be part of the conference.
About how many people attend the conference?
We generally have a couple of thousand people attend over the 3-day period.
It's a 3-day conference.
Right, it's a thrill. This actually, we're going to be going 4 days because we're starting on Thursday. And we have at least 1,000 young people who will be attending on that Thursday. And then with the combination of writers' workshops and presentations, and we also do a cultural program, usually around music and literature. We'll have another couple of thousand people over the next several days. But one of the panels we have defining urban, street, and hip-hop literature, its evolution and impact on American culture. That's one of the issues.
Is that, you're going to have a writer talking about?
We're going to have a panel discussion. We're going to have a panel discussion on migration and cultural memory in the literature of Black writers.
Are they going to actually read from some of the writings?
These are, some people will be a combination of reading, but they will be focusing on the issues present related to that theme as they relate to the books written by those writers. Okay. And then we also will have another area where people will be reading from their works.
Well, let's talk about Brenda Green and what you've written. What are some of the things that you have written? I see this book, Resistance and Transformation, Conversation with Black Writers. Now, is this something that came out of the Black Writers
This is
Workshop?
something we tried to do the proceedings from the National Black Writers Conference, and this book was edited by me, Resistance and Transformation, Conversations with Black Writers, and it's it's not actually a transcript, but it's really a discussion and combination of transcript of some of the relevant themes that came out of that conference. That was the 8th National Black Writers Conference.
Well, what were the relevant themes?
That conference, Resistance and Transformation, we had as our main speakers were Randall Robinson, and we had Cornel West, and we had Walter Mosley. So we talked, again, it goes back to, let me just go back to this. The major topics for that really focused on the whole idea of transformation, transforming our lives and transforming the world. That was the theme of that conference. That when we talk about the fact that Black writers are really activists, can be activists and can have an impact on the culture, on their culture and on society, that if they actively look at ways in which the literature they write has a dramatic impact on the lives of people. And one of the things you do is to focus on how you use writing as an act of resistance. So we had writers speaking to that theme.
Now, another one of your books is The African Presence and Influence on the Culture of Americas. Now, is that related to the Pan-African movement?
That was actually an outgrowth of a conference that originated in CUNY. That was a CUNY-wide conference looking at the African presence in the cultures of the Americas. It was spearheaded by the former provost at Hostos. This book really is a result of looking at the way that the African presence is evident in our literature, in our music.
Okay, well, with that, as we come to the end of the program, what is the future for the Center and the National Black Writers Conference? What's the future, Joel?
Well, we believe that the Center for Black Literature has an ongoing responsibility to make sure that the literature of Black writers is known to the general public, is known to our young people, and we will continue to host the National Black Writers Conference, to provide workshops where writers can work on their craft in a very safe environment. Excuse me?
Will you receive support from the college and from foundations or for CUNY? How are you going to get the support for this?
The center, because we are a center at Medgar Evers College, we have to raise the money for all of our programs.
But
And
the
that
college, I hope, is
the
supportive
college,
of this.
the college is supportive in that it's the home for the Center for Black Literature, and but most of all of the programming for the National Black Writers Conference, for our retreats, our literary programs, we have to raise the money, and that's part of what we do as a center within CUNY.
And you're
so,
also a professor of literature, right?
Yes, I am a professor of literature and writing, and so I'm teaching. Currently, I'm teaching African American literature. I've children's literature. My original area of expertise was in the teaching of writing, so I really kind of cross all boundaries, and I really enjoy teaching, and it's a way of making sure that I stay connected with young people, and it's a way of mentoring. We have some of our English majors at the college do work at the Center for Black Literature, so it's a way of really staying connected. So it's really kind of creating the whole, writing. I'm involved in writing
climate,
book reviews and
The
supporting-
umbrella.
Yes.
The umbrella.
The center is the umbrella for all of that. And
Today on African American Legends, we've been talking with Professor Brenda Green, the director and founder of the Center for Black Literature at Medgar College of the City University of New York. Thanks for being with us today, Brenda.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.